it's time to talk about those rerolls the Marines are getting all over the place. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're doing a bit of a math hammer video, namely, what do your units actually get out of rerolling? A lot of the time people just intuitively know what value a reroll has, and whether they should make the sacrifices they need to get one. But often I do see players really overvaluing their rerolls, or not really understanding what sort of effects they will have on their unit's shooting. So let's go over a few common examples now. I'd say the most common example of rerolls in Warhammer 40k is the reroll 1s to hit and wounds that you often get from, say, Space Marine captains and lieutenants. Which is more powerful, rerolling the dice to hit or rerolling the dice to wound? When you actually look into it, they're both exactly the same strength of buff, and unless there's any more complicated special rules going into your shooting, then either reroll 1s to hit or reroll 1s to wound will both increase your damage output by roughly 17%. The reason for this is that the only actual outcome of your shooting that matters is the amount of wounds you actually deal to the target at the end of the firing sequence. A shot has to both hit and to wound to be able to achieve this, so they're both of equal value to be able to reroll those 1s. Some people might feel that it's more valuable to reroll a roll of 1, say if they have a 2-up roll or 3-up roll to make, and they might think that that's more valuable than rerolling 1s on a 5 or 6 to wound. But in either case you're adding a 17% buff to the weapon's chance of passing that roll. 17% is roughly 1/6, and this is the case because basically you have a 1 in 6 chance of rolling a 1 on any dice roll, and that 1 will become another equal chance to pass that dice roll. So this means it doesn't matter whether you're rolling to wound on a 5-up or 2-up, you will be giving yourself an extra chance of passing the dice roll 1/6 of the time, therefore a 17% buff. I'm honestly not sure if I've explained that quite right, but it is the way that the math shakes out in the end. This means if, say, you had a unit of Space Marines that would normally score 6 wounds on a target, if they're in range of either a captain or a lieutenant, then you will usually expect to wind up with 7 wounds on the target instead of the 6. The captain and the lieutenant buffs do synergize slightly together, because if you're passing more hit rolls, then you're generating more chances to roll to wound and more chances to reroll that 1 on a failed wound. So this means if you're rerolling hit rolls to hit and to wound, then you're applying a 36% damage increase on the target unit, very slightly better, so slightly higher than double the value of 1 captain or lieutenant on their own. Obviously, this damage increase is going to be far more powerful on the higher damage units in your army. This is why people like to cluster units like Repulsor Executioners and Leviathan Dreadnoughts around a sort of reroll of 1s to hit and reroll of 1s to wound. As obviously, if you add an extra 36% increase to an enormous amount of damage, then it's a lot better than adding the 36% increase to a small amount of damage. So that's why we like to cluster big units inside these reroll auras. So that's reroll 1s then. Let's move on to the Chapter Master's full rerolls to hit. Now, unlike reroll of 1s, the bonus provided by a Chapter Master of rerolling all hits does actually change depending on your own unit's ballistic skill profile. Basically, the worse your ballistic skill is, the greater percentage increased damage you will get out of the Chapter Master rerolls. This is because, say if you're hitting on a 2-up, you're only rerolling the 1, so you're rerolling 1 chance out of 6. But say if you're hitting on a 4-up, you'd be rerolling the dice either on a 1, 2 or 3, which is a much higher chance of activating that reroll buff. For a quick breakdown, Ballistic Skill 2-up will give you a 1/6 damage increase, or about 17%. Ballistic Skill 3-up will give you a 33% damage increase. Ballistic Skill 4-up will give you a 50% damage increase. Chapter Master rerolls on a ballistic skill of 5-up will give you a 66% damage increase, and rerolling on a 6-up will give you an 83% damage increase, which is almost double. This, incidentally, is why Chapter Masters are so great at buffing Overwatch, as it almost doubles your damage output. For Space Marines it's also quite relevant because Chapter Masters are very good at buffing units that have any minuses to hit against them, such as Eldar Flyers with their multiple stacking minuses to hit, or if you've had to move a heavy weapon, or if you've had a vehicle degrade due to taking a lot of damage and is now hitting on a worse ballistic skill. All of these scenarios will lead to your chapter master having a much greater impact than just the flat 33% damage increase he would be having if he was just buffing a squad of marines that normally hit on a 3+. Incidentally, if you combine a chapter master and lieutenant reroll, then you get a 55% damage increase if you're using that on a standard space marine unit with a 3+ ballistic skill. So that is really quite powerful indeed, and shows us why Guilliman is still quite good as a buff character, though of course he is a lot more expensive now. Also, this scaling damage buff based on how bad the roll is was why Guilliman in his previous incarnation with full rerolls to hit and wound could put the damage potential of some units absolutely through the roof, and why a lot of players like to run mid-strength weaponry with him, such as strength 6 or strength 7 guns, which in a lot of common scenarios he would actually double the amount of damage coming out of them, or even more. You can still access this effect through the Ultramarines Seal of Oath relic, although thankfully it is now only limited to 1 unit in your opponent's army. But there'll be more on that tomorrow in my full Ultramarines Codex review. I think I'll leave the math hammer there for today. Hope I managed to make that some semblance of clear. The main takeaway message is that rerolls of 1 only add about 1/6 to your damage output for any given unit, and I often see people spending a lot of command points for that very marginal bonus. It's definitely good to have if you can get it for cheap, or get it to apply to a lot of units, but it's not really all that powerful all on its own. Thanks very much for listening to another Auspex Tactics quick tip. At some point I will do a similar video to this based on modifiers, so things that can add and subtract from your rolls to hit and to wound. And possibly if I'm feeling a bit brave, then maybe covering the Master Artisans and Salamanders rerolls, where the maths gets a little more complicated. Again, thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video.